Hello and welcome back to State of the Division, here with UFC 284 this time. And if we're being brutally honest, this card is not great. I think there's some interesting talent possibilities on this card, but overall, I think this card is pretty lackluster. Obviously, we have the two title fights, but beyond that, I mean, we got Justin Tafa and Parker Porter fighting on the main card. And while I say there were cancellations, yes, there were only two, and to be honest, I don't think they make that much of a difference. I think there's some possibilities here, but overall, this card's not that great. But whatever, let's dive right in and take a look, as always, with our early prelims. And these names I'm guaranteed to get wrong. Starting us off at 25-1, Zubaira Warrior Tukagov tries to get 2 in a row against UFC newcomer 13-3 Elves Brenner Oliveira, or Elves Brenner, depending on what site you use. Elves is about 7 years younger, 2 or 1 inch in height in favor of Elves, and I got no idea on reach. It's not listed and I couldn't figure it out. Tukagov here is the UFC veteran, and he's a janky fighter. This will be a common thread. His landed to absorbed isn't great, a 294 to 284 with 7 KO wins though, so you kind of see that power punching style. However, he only has 2 of those in the UFC. Takedown percentage is decent, but he looks to be inconsistent with it. More takedowns coming in his losses than his wins. He strikes me as more of a grinder with some knockout power, but anything's possible. Now, Elves looks like a submission specialist since he has 11 submission wins in his career. He also doesn't seem to get knocked out that much, and I couldn't really find much else to talk about because I'd use Sherdog for everything on this. Now, Vegas likes Tukagov, and I'm going to agree. I think there's a definite path for Elves to win, but I feel like the experience of Tukagov and the somewhat existent takedown game will help him out a little bit. 13-6, Shane, Sugar, or Smokin', Young tries to stop his skid against another newcomer in 7-0-1, Blake Builder. Really should have had a nickname in there. Young is 3 years younger, steals 4 inches in reach with dead even height. Jesus. Young's another fighter who's all over the place in terms of stats. Striking is a 5.22 to 5.01, but he hasn't really had any luck with KOs, only notching 1, and that was in 2018. He seems like an all-or-nothing kind of striker where he either dominates the lead or gets run over. His takedowns aren't anything to write home about either, with a .80 and inconsistent appearances. Builder is coming off a Contender Series win and overall seems like a ground game submission-based fighter. He's got 4 submission wins and 2 decision wins. Doesn't seem like striking is his strong suit, but it seems like it's functional at best. The narrow favorite here is Young, but I'm going to disagree with Vegas here, and I'm going to run with Builder. It's a bit of a gamble, but Young doesn't have a great takedown defense, and considering how aggressive Builder is with takedowns and submission games, this plus the fact that Young is on a 2-fight losing streak, Builder has the pseudo-hot hand here, and I think his aggressive takedowns will stack the odds towards his favor. All right, so this fight has a weird naming thing. Looking up UFC 284, we have 7-3, Luma Lukbonmi. I probably said it wrong, but on Sherdog, it is Kunklak Supasara. I'm so sorry. With her ring name being Luma Lukbonmi. Either way, she's 7-3, and she's looking to notch a win against 6-2 Elise Reed. Reed is 3 years older and takes 2 inches in height and reach. Supasara is a decently rounded fighter who makes use of a strong striking game, 4.21 to 2.56, and a consistent ground game of 1.83. Doesn't really seem like that's her focus or her specialty, but it works. Doesn't seem to have all that much power, instead kind of doing that grinding style to wins, racking up a striking total and keeping the opponent off of her and just keeping the points. In her wins, she always takes that demanding striking lead and normally will stack several takedowns in there on that. In all, she's sort of the poster child grinder is probably the best way to describe her, and that's not a knock on her, that's just the best way I can describe it. Reed is similar in style, but with worse stat-based numbers. A 2.77 to 3.57 in striking and a .94 takedown average. Now the main difference here seems to really be the tendency of Reed to get finished and not get the takedowns. Oftentimes you'll see Supasara get the takedown and Reed won't. Vegas likes Supasara here, and I'm going to agree. The fighters are vaguely similar, but I think what sells it for me is Reed getting hit more than Supasara. Reed will get hit more, will get knocked out more, while Supasara is able to generate more point-worthy contact and avoid getting hit herself. and that gives her the edge in my mind. 10-2, Jack Farr Jenkins, stupid ring name, looks to start his career strong against the 12-4 Don Shameless Shannis. I said that wrong. Jenkins is 2 years younger, looks to be 1 inch taller, and does steal 1 in reach. Both of these guys are new to the UFC, but technically Jenkins is riding the hot streak. Contender Series win-wise, he's rocking a 3.57 to 1.17 in striking, a takedown average of 4.14. Outside the UFC, he presents as more of a striker, with half his wins coming by knockout. He also can win by submission, but he's only done it 3 times. Shannis has fought once last year, losing in the first by guillotine choke, and as a result, he has a 6-18 striking percentage, which means nothing for this. But outside the UFC, he looks like a striker who tends to hang on the feet and avoid going to the ground. Vegas is digging Jenkins for this one, and easily I'm going to agree. A, I don't have a lot of information to go on, and B, Jenkins goes to the ground a lot. Shannis likes staying on the feet. I tend to deviate to the ground fighter unless I'm doing obvious favoritism. I'm going to pick Jenkins here. 15-5, Jamie Mullarkey, with the whitest name here, tries to get his win streak to 2 against another UFC newcomer in 11-0, Francisco Prado. Mullarkey is 8 years older at 28, 2 inches taller, and I don't know about reach. Mullarkey is another weird fighter to look at on this card. He rocks a 4.18 to 4.88 in striking and is capable of pulling out power to finish a fight. And it is backed up with a 2.53 takedown percentage. He feels like a grinder, but with the majority of his wins coming by KO, he really relies on that power to finish. Prado rocks up as a finisher with all his wins coming by KO or submission. And obviously he's undefeated, and I can't really testify to his takedown game, really. But he has to at least be decent in some capacity for him to have that record. Vegas here picks Mullarkey, and while I agree, I don't think he should be this much of a favorite. I do think Mullarkey will win given the slightly more UFC experience and the fact he seems to have a solid stand-up and good chin, but I think Prado should be given more consideration here simply based on the fact that he's looked very solid in all of his other fights, and Mullarkey is not the highest caliber of UFC competition. Ending off our early prelims, 12-6, Shannon Ross, the Turkish Delight, squares off against 7-2, Cledson K.R. Rodriguez, who I believe was featured on one of my first versions of these. Ross is 6 years older, 1 inch shorter, and once again, I don't know reach. Ross is coming off a Contender Series loss, but overall, he looks like a striker who's willing to swang and bang in most cases, especially with 6 career KO wins and 5 decision. Seems like he likes to pursue the finish, but is capable of going the distance if he doesn't get it, so decent cardio. That being said, like a Contender Series fight, getting caught is always an option with this style of fighter. Rodriguez also follows that high-octane striking idea, though in the UFC and Contender Series, he didn't seem to really get any finishing shots. Career-wise, he only has 3 KO wins, so I'm not sure how frequent they will be in the UFC. Favorite here is Rodriguez, and I'm going to agree. Both fighters look to swing, and it doesn't really seem like Rodriguez gets knocked out all that much. In addition, he does have some submission wins, so if you go to the ground, he might be able to steal it there. But on to the actual prelims, of which we only have 2 based on what I read. 10-1-1. Joshua Kulabau looking to build on his streak against 7-1 Melsik the Gun Bagassarian. Best name here. Kulabau is 3 years younger, 1 inch taller, and does take 3 in reach. Kulabau's a grinder, and he's that weird type of grinder that keeps it on the feet. So he rocks a 3.06 flat, solid 0% of his takedowns, so he has an 82% takedown defense and 5 KOs outside the UFC. He tends to keep the striking close whenever not in the lead, and even when taken down, has proven some sort of ability to survive and get back to the feet. Not to mention, he has thrown a submission attempt. Melsik is very different. He rocks a 6.0 to a 3.48 in striking, does not seem to shoot takedowns like Kulabau, and rocks a 70% takedown defense. Now, this fight is dead even, so I don't have my easy way out like I like using, but I am going to lean Melsik here. Kulabau easily has a shot, but I like how much more Melsik seems to land compared to Kulabau. He doesn't trade as much. He doesn't get hit as much. He doesn't have to rely on a chin as much. I don't know how much of a better fighter that makes him, but in this fight, I'm going to lean Melsik. And now, ending the prelims. 9-3, Tyson Pedro looks to keep rolling against the returning 13-5, Modestats, the Baltic Gladiator, Buskauskas. Pedro is 3 years older, with an inch in reach being the only other difference. Pedro is a killer-be-killed fighter from the school of swang and bang. He rocks a 2.96 to 2.35 in striking, and with the exception of his Latifi fight, every UFC fight he has been in has ended in a finish, for better or for worse. It is worth pointing out that he does also have a submission game with 5 career wins by that method, though his last UFC win that way was in 2018. Doesn't appear to shoot takedowns all that often, but he has to have some sort of ground game given his submissions. Now, Bukauskas, as mentioned, is making a return to the UFC octagon for about a year stint in Cage Warriors. That aside, he seems to be a heavy striker who leans hard into the knockout game. 9 career wins that way. It is worth noting he did have a 100% takedown defense during his initial stint. Also worth taking a look at is the fact that he went 1-3 in that stint. Now, Pedro is the Vegas favorite, and I'm going to agree. Both fighters like standing and swinging, and in that note, I think the slight edge goes to Pedro, who constantly goes for that kill, versus Bukauskas, who seems to more likely just get the kill when he gets the chance. For the main card, we open with the 12-3, Jimmy the Brute Crute, trying to rebound against 13-3, Alonzo Atomic Menafield. Crute is 9 years younger, 2 inches taller, and does lose 2 in reach. Crute's a kill-or-be-killed fighter again, with every one of his UFC fights ending in a finish. He rocks a 4.33 to 2.76 in striking, and as mentioned, he can bring out the power in spades when needed. Backing that up is the 4.87 takedown average and the dangerous submission game that he can throw. Now, the main note here is that he has been beat on the ground before, so he isn't immortal. Menafield actually is a similar fighter in terms of style, but numbers-wise, he's a different story. He's a 3.91 to 3.24 in striking. While he does have power, he does tend to get hit more. He does have a takedown game as well, but it seems to be much more a traditional ground and pound game without pushing for the submission. Crute is the favorite, and I'm going to disagree. Not incredibly confident in this, but not incredibly confident in this since Crute is dangerous. But Menafield is very aggressive with the takedowns and consistently uses them, which could be a difference maker here. Getting Crute to the ground again and again and again can likely give Menafield time to recover or time to get points just by being on top and throwing ground and pound strikes. This fight should be a knockout. I feel like it'll end in decision is sort of what I'm saying. 5-3 Justin Badman Taffa looks to hit Strad against 12-7 Parker Porter. Taffa's 8 years younger at 29, only the difference being an inch in reach going to Porter. Now Taffa is a classic heavyweight rocking 5.02 to 5.94 and is willing to step in and swing to the heavens, especially considering every win of his is a KO. That being said, he is 100% for his takedown defense and has shown ability to make it close in fights and hang in against other heavyweights with power. Porter's is a little different since he hasn't really had all that much power show up when he's been in the ring, and he's always shown up as more of a grinder. Striking is a 6.49 to 6.32 where he hangs in against other heavyweights he's fought. Additionally, he has a consistent takedown game in his wins, but he does have an issue when he gets taken down. Taffa is the narrow favorite, and I'm going to agree. He has some serious knockout power and may be able to neutralize the takedowns of Porter. That and Porter has a single win over a fighter who has a current winning UFC record, which isn't great. Now, the last fight before the 2 main events. 13-2, Jack Della Maddalena looks to keep his UFC win streak alive against 16-4, Randy Rude Boy Brown. Maddalena is 6 years younger, 4 inches shorter, and loses 5 in reach. Now, Maddalena is a striking heavy fighter who can pack a heavy punch. 11 career KOs with 3 in the UFC. Rocks an 8.45 to 4.22 in striking, and soundly seems to take the striking lead with none of the fights in the UFC being all that close in terms of striking. He did go the distance in his Contender Series fight, but his last 3 have all been in the first. Now, Brown's a good bit different. He rocks a 4.38 to a 3.25 in striking, and while he does have KO wins, hasn't knocked anyone out since 2019. He does tend to also take the striking lead in his bouts, but has shown the occasional ability to shoot takedowns, and multiple times has secured submission wins. Now, Maddalena is the favorite in Vegas, and I'm going to agree. Randy Brown likely can hang in there, but I think the higher octane aggression of Maddalena will edge it towards him, considering the difference in their landed to absorbed. For the co-main event and the featherweight title, 14-3-1, Yair El Pantera Rodriguez squares off against the 18-2 Josh Emmett. Rodriguez is 6 years younger, 5 inches taller, but only snags 1 inch in reach. Rodriguez is a bit of an all-rounder who leans towards striking. He rocks a 4.67 to 4.12 with 5 career KOs, though he only has 1 since 2019. Past that, he's a very competent in striking, and in his wins, he's able to outpace his opponents or come back with power in order to beat them. He can shoot takedowns, doesn't seem to call on that skill set too often, though. Emmett's similar in how he leans on the striking, but unlike Rodriguez, he keeps it much closer in his fights. He has a 4.28 to 4.29 in striking, which makes sense, but he does have some serious toughness and has been able to outpoint his opponents in order to get his wins. He does have a 1.04 takedown average, but that comes across as an opportunity and tactics things over a consistent feature. Rodriguez is the narrow favorite. As much as I want to pick the underdog here, I do think he will win. Emmett could win, and there's a definite realistic expectation for him to win, but I like the higher aggression of Rodriguez, which I think will help him outpace Emmett, and if it goes to decision, give him the points. Now, for the main event, looking to stop a new double champ and protect his newly won belt, 23-1, Islam Makhachev takes on 25-1, Alexander the Great Volkanovski. Makhachev is 4 inches taller, but somehow loses an inch in reach. However, he is the native to this weight class compared to Volk, who is coming up. Now, Makhachev is scary. He has a 2.37 landed to a 0.95 absorb, where a takedown average of 3.42. In part, this results in a lot of fights, in my opinion, getting slowed down to his ideal pace, where he just gets to dominate you on the ground or just piece you up on the feet. And something that speaks volumes of his danger factor is the fact that he's a very competent striker with a variety of ways to come at you. He's also dangerous with submissions, and if he gets you on the ground, you give him the chance, you know he's going to take it, and likely he'll sink it. Now, Volkanovski is best described as a dude who wins. In my opinion, his style seems to change ever so slightly depending on the opponent using methods or working around his opponent's strength. That being said, he always has solid striking at a 6'7" to 3'5", and has been able to bring out power enough to get the KO TKO, though that may also have to do with volume over everything. His ground game is also solid, though as I mentioned, it fits more into the I want to win style of fighting, where it comes out against other fighters, and then against certain fighters, it doesn't exist. For the main event, I'm torn. Vegas likes Makhachev, but I like Volkanovski as a fighter. However, my pride in a meaningless correct prediction record makes me lean towards Makhachev here. Mostly it's the fact that this is his natural weight class, and that sort of slow down style he uses in his fights is difficult to work around, since he dictates pace, he dictates what's going on, what's going where, and what's happening. And while I think Volk has a chance and can do things, Makhachev's natural at this weight class. Makhachev just got his belt. Makhachev has the physical attributes. Volk's got his work cut out for him. In the end, this card has decent fights. This is obviously one of the cards of the year where it's like, we need title fights. We'll sell it on these 2 fights, and we got not much else for this card. You get those cards. It sucks it's the February card. We'll make do and move on. I think the best 2 fights are the title fights on this card. Part of me is interested in how the heavyweight fight turns out. I'd love to see Tafa start putting it together and going a run, but I'm not all that sold on Tafa. Porter, I'm not sold on him either. He's struggled with some weird fighters, and the fact that all of his wins are against, well, his 3 wins, 2 of them are against opponents who don't have winning records in the UFC. You can see my trepidation there. Again, the prospects are prospects. We won't know what happens till we watch it. All in all, UFC 284 will have 2 interesting title fights, and that's all that really jumps out at me. I'd love to get proven wrong, but based on what I'm watching, it seems like a pretty standard card. If you want to, leave an opinion in the comments. Yell at me if you think I'm wrong. Last card, I went 7 for 15 on predictions. I'll keep updating this as I go. The goal is to be over 500 for the year. In the end, thank you for watching.